The long gravel driveway stretched before us as Dad's sedan slowly approached the white farmhouse in the distance. Cornfields surrounded both sides of the path, tall stalks swaying gently in the warm July breeze. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, watching dust clouds rise behind us. "Almost there," Dad said, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. I nodded but said nothing. The annual Wilson family reunion at Grandma and Grandpa's farm had always been a highlight of my summer. This year felt different. This year was my turn. Mom reached back from the passenger seat and squeezed my hand. "Emma, honey, try to relax." Easy for her to say. She'd gone through her turn nearly 30 years ago. Whatever happened during these mysterious family traditions remained locked behind tight lips and troubled expressions. As we pulled up to the 19th century farmhouse, I spotted several cars already parked in the yard. Uncle Rob's black pickup truck, Aunt Kathy's minivan, and Aunt Martha's sensible sedan. Cousin Grant had apparently arrived before us too, his motorcycle leaning against the side of the barn. "Max, grab the cooler," Dad instructed my brother as we climbed out of the car. Max nodded, hoisting the cooler with surprising ease for a 16-year-old. His face betrayed no emotion, but I knew he was thinking about next year, when it would be his turn. Grandma Eleanor appeared on the wraparound porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual practical bun, her posture straight even though she was 78 years old. "There you are," she called, her voice carrying across the yard. Come in. Everyone's almost here." As we approached, I noticed her eyes linger on me a moment longer than necessary. The weight of her look made my stomach clench. The inside of the farmhouse smelled of freshly baked bread and something else, herbs I couldn't identify. The living room buzzed with conversation that quieted noticeably when I entered. Aunt Kathy and Uncle Rob exchanged glances. Aunt Martha smiled too brightly. "Emma!" Grandpa Harold emerged from the kitchen. "You've grown since Christmas." "Hi, Grandpa," I said, accepting his stiff hug. In the corner, Cousin Grant sat alone, staring into a glass of lemonade. At 25, he should have been the life of the party. The Grant I remembered from childhood had been boisterous and full of jokes. Now he barely looked up when I waved. 3 years had passed since his turn, and whatever happened had changed him fundamentally. "Emma, you'll be in the east bedroom upstairs," Grandma announced, appearing at my elbow. "It's appropriate for your turn." "What does that mean?" I asked. "The morning light is good in there," she replied vaguely. "Diana, Thomas, you'll be in the blue room. Max gets the small bedroom next to the bathroom." I watched as Uncle Rob stepped onto the porch for the third time in 15 minutes, his eyes scanning the property before walking purposefully toward the barn. He checked the heavy padlock on the door, tugging it firmly before seeming satisfied. Lunch was a strained affair. Conversations stuck to safe topics: crop yields, local politics, and Max's baseball season. Whenever I tried to ask about the tradition, someone would change the subject or offer me more potato salad. "Everyone says it's my turn this year," I finally said during a lull in conversation. "My turn for what exactly?" The table fell silent. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "It maintains family bonds," Grandma said after a moment, her voice firm. "Has for generations." "But what is it?" I pressed. "Different for everyone," Mom murmured, not meeting my eyes. "But necessary." That afternoon, while everyone was busy setting up the volleyball net in the backyard, I slipped away to explore the old house. The upstairs hallway was lined with photographs, generations of Wilsons standing in front of this very farmhouse. I paused at a black and white image from 1952, studying the faces. Even with the formal pose, I could see it. That same troubled look I'd noticed in Grant's eyes, in Dad's occasional blank stare. In the study, I discovered photo albums organized by decade. I flipped through reunion photos from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Each year featured someone different with that same expression, distant and troubled. "You won't find answers in there," I jumped, nearly dropping the album. Max stood in the doorway, his lanky frame leaning against the jamb. "Did Mom and Dad tell you anything?" I asked him. "About what happens?" Max shrugged. "Just that I'm next year." "Aren't you scared?" "What's the point? Everyone goes through it." His resignation unnerved me more than fear would have. This wasn't typical teenage bravado. It was acceptance of something inevitable. Later, I spotted Aunt Kathy standing on a small stepladder in the kitchen doorway, tucking something above the frame. When she noticed me watching, she quickly descended. "Just a family tradition," she explained, but her smile seemed forced. "A little protection for the house." I glanced up. A small bundle of dried herbs tied with red thread hung discreetly above the door. After dinner, as twilight settled over the farm, I approached Grant. He sat alone on the porch swing, pushing himself back and forth with one foot. "Can we talk?" I asked, sitting beside him. His eyes quickly moved toward me, then away. "About what?" "About your turn. 3 years ago." His foot stopped moving. The swing creaked to a halt. "No. I just want to know what—" "You'll find out soon enough." His hands were trembling slightly. "I need to help Uncle Rob with something." He left me sitting alone, more unsettled than before. That night, Grandma showed me to the east bedroom. The space was simple but comfortable. A double bed with a handmade quilt, a wooden dresser, and a small desk beneath the window. "Try to sleep," she said, her hand lingering on the doorknob. "Whatever you may hear tonight." "What will I hear?" I asked. "That depends." Her expression softened momentarily. "The tradition maintains family bonds, Emma. Remember that." After she left, I unpacked my overnight bag and changed into pajamas. The digital clock on the nightstand read 10:42 p.m. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle. At 11:30, voices drifted up from downstairs, too quiet to make out words, but the tone was urgent. I recognized Grandpa's deep rumble, then Uncle Rob's sharper replies. I got up and pressed my ear to the door. "Checked everything twice," Uncle Rob was saying. "Not enough if—" Grandma's voice. Her time now, like all of us. That was Mom, her voice tight with emotion. I pulled away from the door, feeling anxious. Crawling back into bed, I pulled the quilt up to my chin. Outside, an owl hooted mournfully. The clock now read 11:47 p.m. Sleep seemed impossible as questions tumbled through my mind. What was this tradition that nobody would explain? What had happened to Grant 3 years ago that left him so changed? What would happen to me? To Max next year? Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting shadows on the wall. I stared at them, trying to ignore the soft footsteps that occasionally passed my door, the whispers that followed. Sometime after midnight, I heard the distinct sound of metal tools being moved in the distance. From the barn, perhaps? I strained to listen, but the noise didn't repeat. I must have eventually drifted off, because I jerked awake at the sound of my doorknob turning slowly. The digital clock showed 2:14 a.m. The door remained closed, but I could see the shadow of feet in the gap beneath it. Someone was standing just outside, listening. I held my breath, waiting. After what felt like eternity, the shadow moved away. Footsteps receded down the hallway. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the east bedroom window. For a moment, the warm glow almost made me forget the uneasiness of the night before. Almost. The memory of footsteps outside my door and the shadowy figure lingered as I sat up in bed. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 8 times. I pulled on jeans and a t-shirt before making my way downstairs, where the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. "Morning, sleepyhead," Mom said, flipping pancakes at the stove. "Everyone else has already eaten." "Why didn't you wake me?" I asked, pouring myself orange juice. "Grandma said to let you rest." Mom slid a plate of pancakes across the counter. Big day today. Annual reunion barbecue at the pond. Softball game after lunch. I stabbed at my pancakes. Yeah, sounds super normal and fun. Mom's smile faltered. Emma, please, just try to enjoy the day. Through the kitchen window, I could see family members setting up folding tables near the pond. Uncle Rob carried a cooler while Aunt Kathy arranged plastic tablecloths, all of them acting like nothing strange was happening this weekend. Where's Grant? I asked, finishing my breakfast. Helping your grandfather with the grill, I think. Mom took my plate. Why don't you go see if they need help? I found Grant near the pond, arranging charcoal in the old barrel grill. The morning sun reflected off the water surface, and in another context, it might have been peaceful. Hey, I said, approaching him. Grant flinched, nearly dropping the bag of charcoal. Hey, Emma. Can we talk about last night? About what's happening here? His hands trembled as he arranged the coals. Nothing to talk about. Grant, come on. Everyone's acting weird and no one will tell me anything about this turn I'm supposed to take. He stood up suddenly, wiping his hands on his jeans. Just leave it alone, Emma, please. But 3 years ago, what happened to you? I said leave it. His voice cracked. I need to get lighter fluid from the shed. He walked away quickly, his shoulders hunched, hands still visibly shaking. I watched him go, frustrated and increasingly worried. Throughout the morning, I noticed family members watching me. Dad's eyes followed me as I helped set up lawn chairs. Aunt Martha kept finding reasons to check if I needed anything. Even Max seemed to be keeping tabs on my location. By noon, the barbecue was in full swing. Hamburgers and hot dogs sizzled on the grill while kids from the extended family splashed in the shallow end of the pond. Anyone watching would think it was just a normal family reunion. Emma, Uncle Rob called, tossing a softball my way. We're starting the game. You're on my team. The softball game in the backfield should have been fun. Normally, I enjoyed the annual match, Wilson versus Wilson, with family pride on the line. But today, every laugh seemed forced, every casual conversation deliberately avoiding certain topics. When I missed an easy catch, Uncle Rob patted my shoulder. Head in the game, Emma. Sorry, just distracted. Try not to think too much, he said, squeezing my shoulder a little too tightly. It's better that way. During a break in the game, I slipped away toward the old oak barn. The massive structure had always been off limits during reunions, with Grandpa insisting it housed dangerous farm equipment. Now I wondered what it really contained. The heavy wooden door was secured with the same padlock Uncle Rob had checked yesterday. I ran my fingers along the weathered wood, noticing what I hadn't seen before. Symbols carved into the frame. Not recent graffiti, but old markings that had darkened with age. Some looked like eyes, others like twisted branches, arranged in patterns that made no sense. I traced one symbol with my fingertip, feeling grooves worn smooth by time. What were these? Why would anyone carve them into a barn? Emma, what are you doing? I jumped at Uncle Rob's voice. He stood several yards away, his expression a mix of anger and fear. Just looking at the barn, I said, trying to sound casual. These carvings are interesting. Old farming superstitions, he said dismissively, walking toward me. Your grandfather's father was into that nonsense. Come on, your mom needs help setting up the dessert table. As he guided me back toward the house, his hand firm on my shoulder, I glanced back at the barn. The symbols seemed to watch us go. The afternoon drifted by in a haze of forced normalcy. I helped sort through old family photos with Aunt Martha, played cards with Max, and listened to second cousins talk about their college plans. All the while, the undercurrent of tension never faded. Passing the kitchen, I heard raised voices and paused outside the partially open door. Can't keep doing this forever, Harold, Grandma said, her voice uncharacteristically emotional. It's kept the family safe for generations, Grandpa replied firmly. You want to be the one who breaks the chain? You want that responsibility? She's just a girl, Harold. They're all just children when we were all just children once, he cut her off. The ritual is necessary, You know that as well as I do. I backed away quietly, feeling alert even through the artificial drowsiness. What ritual? What chain were they talking about? By early evening, the family gathered back at the farmhouse for dinner. The dining room table had been extended with card tables to accommodate everyone. Aunt Kathy brought out a pitcher of amber liquid. "Family tradition," she announced cheerfully. "Apple cider from the orchard. Wilson family special recipe." She poured glasses for everyone, and I noticed the adults watching as the pitcher made its rounds. When my glass was filled, I caught a whiff of something bitter beneath the apple scent. Not alcohol, but something else I couldn't identify. "A toast," Grandpa said, raising his glass, "to family bonds that never break." Everyone drank. I raised the glass to my lips but didn't swallow, pretending to sip while looking over the rim. No one seemed to notice when I set my full glass down and occasionally pretended to drink from it. As dinner progressed, I noticed family members becoming increasingly relaxed, their eyes slightly unfocused, laughter coming more easily. Even Grant seemed less tense, slouching in his chair with a slight smile. Even though I hadn't drunk the cider, a heaviness settled over me. My eyelids felt weighted, and concentrating on conversations became difficult. The room seemed overly warm, voices blending together. "You okay, Emma?" Mom asked, touching my forehead. "You look flushed." "Just tired," I mumbled. Grandma appeared at my side. "Perhaps you should head upstairs early, dear. Get a good night's sleep." The way she said it, her tone gentle but insistent, her eyes fixed on mine, sent a chill through me even though I was drowsy. "Everyone needs proper rest before tomorrow," she added meaningfully. "I think I'll stay up a bit longer," I said, fighting the unnatural tiredness. "As you wish." Grandma patted my shoulder and moved away. After dinner, while everyone gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, I noticed the older family members drifting toward the study. My parents, Grandma and Grandpa, Uncle Rob and Aunt Kathy, all slipping away from the main group with serious expressions. I followed quietly, keeping to the shadows of the hallway. The study door remained partially open, and I positioned myself against the wall where I could hear without being seen. "No signs of resistance yet," Uncle Rob was saying. "The herbs in the fireplace will help keep her calm," Aunt Kathy added. "I used extra valerian this year." That explained the strange burning smell and my drowsiness. "She's curious, this one," Grandpa said, "more than most." "It doesn't matter," my father's voice replied, sounding resigned. "She needs to witness it like we all did. There's no other way." "The contract must be honored," Grandma said firmly. "Every generation." Mom's voice came next, barely audible. "I just wish..." "Wishing changes nothing," Grandpa interrupted. "This protects all of us. You know that, Diana." I backed away from the door, feeling alert even through the artificial drowsiness. Contract? Witness? The pieces weren't fitting together, but whatever waited for me clearly terrified even the adults. I retreated to the living room, where Max sat watching a baseball game with our younger cousins. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." "Maybe you should go to bed," he suggested, an echo of Grandma's words that felt too deliberate to be coincidence. I nodded and headed for the stairs, feeling eyes on my back as I climbed to the second floor. I sat on the edge of my bed, fighting the heaviness in my eyelids. The thin cotton of my nightgown did little to protect against the strange chill that had settled in the room. Even though it was July and hot outside, my digital clock glowed 10:30 p.m. in red numbers. The herbs. Whatever they had burned in the fireplace earlier was still affecting me. I pinched my arm hard, using pain to jolt myself awake. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. I held my breath, listening. Soft whispers drifted through the gap beneath my door, too faint to make out words. Then came the sound of careful footsteps, moving past my room and continuing down the hallway. I stood up and splashed cold water from the bathroom sink onto my face. The shock helped momentarily, but within minutes the drowsiness returned stronger than before. My limbs felt heavy and unresponsive. To keep myself alert, I began writing notes in my phone about everything I'd observed. The symbols on the barn, the strange cider I'd avoided drinking, the hushed conversations about a contract, and my turn to witness. The words blurred on the screen as my eyes struggled to focus. 11:45 p.m. More footsteps in the hallway, these heavier than before. A man's voice murmured something, followed by Aunt Kathy's distinctive whisper, "She should be asleep by now." I forced myself to stay upright, pacing the small bedroom. I tried every trick I could think of, pinching myself, reciting state capitals, and even doing jumping jacks beside the bed. Nothing drove away the artificial tiredness for more than a few minutes. The clock ticked over to midnight, and I felt a momentary surge of triumph. I'd stayed awake this long. I could make it through whatever was coming. My moment of victory was short-lived. The drowsiness overwhelmed me suddenly, stronger than before. I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed again with no clear memory of how I'd gotten there. My phone had fallen to the carpet, screen dark. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The room tilted sideways as I collapsed onto the pillow. Just 5 minutes, I thought. I'll rest my eyes for just 5 minutes. The sound jolted me awake. A horrible scraping noise, metal against metal, followed by a crash. My eyes flew open. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. More noises filtered through my window, equipment being moved, something heavy falling over, and then a sound that startled me. A screech, high-pitched and utterly inhuman, cut through the night air. I sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake. The drowsiness had vanished, replaced by a rush of energy. Another screech, louder this time, accompanied by shouts I recognized as Uncle Rob's voice. Something was happening outside. I grabbed my small battery-powered lantern from my overnight bag and switched it on. The soft glow illuminated my bedroom. "The revealing hour," I whispered, remembering Grandma's words from earlier that day when she'd checked her watch during dinner. It always happens at the revealing hour. More crashes from outside, a thud so heavy it seemed to vibrate through the foundation of the house. My curiosity overcame my fear as I stepped into the hallway, still wearing my white cotton nightgown. The hallway was empty and every door stood ajar. I peered into Max's room. The bed was vacant, covers thrown aside. My parents' room across the hall was similarly abandoned. I moved to the window at the end of the hall that overlooked the farmyard. In the darkness, I could make out moving figures carrying lanterns like mine, creating pools of light that bobbed across the property. They weren't running in panic as I might have expected. Instead, they moved with purpose, all heading in the same direction, toward the barn. That sound came again, that terrible screeching, and I saw several figures pause before continuing their determined march. Whatever was happening, I needed to see it. I needed to understand this tradition that had haunted my family for generations. Even as I felt scared, I felt something pulling me toward the barn, an inexplicable compulsion that I couldn't ignore. I descended the stairs quietly, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The house was eerily silent and empty in a way that felt unnatural. No lights were on. No sounds came from the kitchen or living room. The back door wasn't locked. I stepped outside and immediately shivered. The temperature was unnaturally cold for July in Iowa. The grass beneath my bare feet was coated with dew that felt more like frost. The farmyard was dimly lit by the scattered lanterns of my family members as they converged on the barn. I stood frozen for a moment, watching. Grandma and Grandpa walked side by side. I spotted my parents just behind them, Dad's arm around Mom's shoulders. Uncle Rob carried something long and metallic that caught the light. Aunt Kathy held what looked like a basket covered with a cloth. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, keeping my lantern low. As I moved across the yard, something on the ground caught my eye. Markings in what looked like red paint, forming strange symbols. They created a path leading directly to the barn. I knelt down, examining one of the symbols. A twisted eye-like shape with tendrils extending outward. It matched exactly the carvings I'd seen on the barn doorframe earlier that day. The screeching sound came again, louder now that I was outside. It sent shivers down my spine and raised goosebumps on my arms. Whatever made that noise wasn't natural. The barn doors stood open wide, pouring an eerie reddish glow into the night. The light pulsed subtly. Every instinct told me to run back to the house, to lock myself in my room and hide until morning, but I knew I wouldn't get answers that way. I approached slowly, following the red symbols on the ground. The air grew colder with each step, my breath forming visible clouds. A figure appeared in the barn doorway, outlined against the strange light. After a moment, I recognized Grant. He stood with one hand braced against the door frame, the other extended toward me. "Emma," he called, his voice tight with emotion. "You need to see." I hesitated, clutching my lantern tighter. "It's your turn to witness," he added, his hand still outstretched. That screeching noise erupted again, this time clearly from inside the barn. Grant flinched but didn't move from his position. I took a tentative step forward, then another. Each step was difficult, as if I was fighting against my own body. The red symbols beneath my feet seemed to glow as I approached. Grant's face became clearer as I drew nearer. His eyes were wide, his expression a mix of fear, resignation, and something like relief, as if sharing this burden somehow lessened it. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The contract," he replied simply. "We maintain it tonight." I stood at the threshold, feeling the heat from the strange light washing over me. The contrast with the unnatural cold made my skin prickle. Inside, I could see moving shadows, hear my family's voices raised in what sounded like chanting. One final terrible screech tore through the night air. Grant grabbed my wrist, his fingers ice cold. "Come," he said. "It's time." I hesitated one last moment, feeling both scared and curious. Then I took a deep breath and stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the barn. The inside of the barn was nothing like I expected. Instead of farm equipment or hay bales, the vast space had been cleared to create a circular area marked by more of those strange symbols painted on the dirt floor. Lanterns hung from hooks around the perimeter, casting that eerie reddish glow I'd seen from outside. The air buzzed with energy, making the hair on my arms stand on end. Family members lined the circle: Grandma and Grandpa, my parents, Uncle Rob, Aunt Kathy, Aunt Martha, even Max, all holding lanterns like mine. Their faces looked ghostly in the red light, tight with concentration. But what captured my attention was the creature at the center of the circle. A massive black bull stood there, but it was unlike any farm animal I'd ever seen. It was enormous, its shoulders easily reaching 7 feet tall. Steam rose from its flared nostrils even though the air was unnaturally cold. Its hide was deep black. Its red eyes looked at each family member in turn. Heavy ropes wrapped around its neck and legs, secured to iron stakes driven into the ground. The bull strained against them, making the ropes creak with tension. Each time it moved, that horrible screeching sound filled the air, not from its throat, but from something unnatural about its movement. "What is that thing?" I whispered, unable to look away. Grant's grip on my wrist tightened. "The Harbinger," he said quietly. "It appears every year, and one of us must witness its containment. That's the contract." The family began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, something ancient with harsh consonants and drawn-out vowels. Uncle Rob stepped forward, holding what I now saw was a long metal rod with intricate symbols carved into its surface. Aunt Kathy approached with her basket, pulling back the cloth to reveal glass vials filled with dark liquid. "Watch, but don't interfere," Grant explained hurriedly. "This is your obligation. Just witness." I noticed symbols painted on everyone's foreheads, in what looked like red clay or maybe blood. The same marks I'd seen on the ground outside, the same carvings from the barn door. "What do they mean?" I asked, nodding toward the symbols. "Protection," Grant said. "Ancient marks to—" The bull suddenly reared up, letting out a sound that was part roar, part shriek, a noise no earthly creature should make. I clamped my hands over my ears, nearly dropping my lantern. The chanting grew louder in response. Grandpa stepped forward with a weathered book bound in dark leather, reading from pages that seemed to glow with their own light. Each word he spoke made the bull thrash more violently. The ground beneath our feet trembled. "It's fighting harder this year," Grant whispered, his voice tense. "Something's wrong." As if responding to his words, the bull suddenly lunged forward with impossible strength. One of the ropes snapped with a loud crack. Family members cried out, their chanting faltering momentarily. "Keep the circle," Grandma commanded, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Diana, Thomas, reinforce the eastern point." My parents moved quickly, raising their lanterns higher and resuming the chant with renewed intensity. Uncle Rob approached the bull with his metal rod extended, the symbols along its length beginning to glow with the same reddish light. The bull stared at him, tracking his movement. The creature felt evil, filled with an ancient hatred. This was no ordinary animal. This was something supernatural in bull form. Another rope snapped. The bull lurched forward several feet, and the remaining ropes stretched to their limit. "It's breaking free," Grant gasped, his face pale with terror. "This wasn't supposed to—" The final ropes gave way with loud snaps. The bull was loose. Everything happened too fast. The bull charged directly at Grant, who stood frozen beside me. I tried to pull him away, but my hand slipped from his wrist. The bull's massive horns caught Grant in the midsection, lifting him off the ground easily. Grant screamed as the bull flung him violently against the wooden wall of the barn. He struck with a sickening thud, then crumpled to the ground. Blood sprayed across the hay-covered floor, shockingly bright against the straw. Horror paralyzed me. My lantern slipped from my numb fingers, crashing to the floor. The glass shattered and oil spilled across the dry hay. Flames erupted instantly, racing across the barn floor. "Emma!" Dad shouted from across the circle. Chaos erupted. The bull charged again, this time targeting Uncle Rob. He tried to defend himself with the metal rod, but the bull was too quick. Its horns caught him in the shoulder, tearing through flesh and muscle. Uncle Rob's scream joined the other panicked voices. Smoke began to fill the barn as the fire spread. Through the haze, I saw Grandma and Grandpa dragging Grant's bloodied body toward what looked like a trapdoor in the floor I'd never noticed before. His limbs hung at unnatural angles, blood leaving a trail across the dirt. "The circle is broken," Aunt Kathy cried. "We can't contain it now." The bull turned slowly, its red eyes looking around the barn until they focused on me. Recognition flashed in those inhuman eyes. It knew me somehow. It knew I was the designated witness. It lowered its massive head and charged directly at me. I couldn't move. My feet wouldn't budge, and my muscles froze with terror. The bull's hooves pounded the earth, closing the distance between us with frightening speed. I knew I was about to die and couldn't even scream. "Emma!" Dad's voice broke my paralysis. At the last second, a solid weight slammed into my side. Dad pushed me hard, knocking me away from the bull's path. The massive creature caught him with a glancing blow, sending him spinning to the ground with a grunt of pain. "Dad!" I screamed, finally finding my voice. Smoke stung my eyes as flames climbed the wooden walls of the barn. The heat became unbearable. Hands grabbed me, Mom's hands pulling me toward the barn door. "We need to get out," she shouted over the roar of the fire. "Now!" I stumbled outside into the night air, coughing violently. Behind us, the barn burned intensely with orange flames reaching high. The unnatural cold from earlier had vanished, replaced by intense heat that blistered my skin even from a distance. "Dad's still in there," I cried, trying to break free from Mom's grip. "And Grant, your father knows what to do," Mom said, her voice strained. The others will help him." The bull screeched again, but this time it sounded different, almost triumphant. Dark figures emerged from the burning barn. Uncle Rob leaned heavily on Aunt Kathy, his shoulder a bloody mess. Dad followed, limping but moving under his own power. Grandma and Grandpa came last, carrying Grant between them, his blood soaking through their clothes. My legs gave out. I collapsed in the farmyard, my white nightgown now smudged with dirt and ash. I felt dizzy as shock set in. The horrific images replayed in my mind. Grant impaled on those massive horns, Uncle Rob's shoulder torn open, and Dad knocked to the ground. A shadow fell across me. Grandma stood over me, her silver hair glowing orange in the light from the burning barn. Her face looked ancient in that moment, marked with knowledge no person should have. She knelt beside me, a small pouch in her hands. Her lips moved, forming words in that same strange language I'd heard inside the barn. She reached into the pouch and pulled out a fine powder that sparkled in the firelight. "The witness has fulfilled her obligation," she murmured, sprinkling the powder over my face. It felt cool against my skin, with a scent like mint and something metallic. "The contract is maintained for another cycle." My eyelids grew heavy as the powder settled on my skin. The last thing I saw was the barn collapsing in on itself, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. Behind the flames, for just a moment, I thought I saw the silhouette of the bull, looking at me with those red eyes. Then I lost consciousness. Light pressed against my eyelids. I blinked awake, my head throbbing as consciousness returned. Sunlight streamed through the east window of my bedroom, creating patterns across the handmade quilt covering me. For a moment, I lay still, trying to make sense of where I was. My bedroom, the farmhouse. But how? The memories rushed back. The barn, the massive bull with glowing red eyes, Grant being impaled, Uncle Rob's shoulder torn open, Dad knocked to the ground, the barn engulfed in flames. The powder Grandma had sprinkled on my face before everything went dark. I bolted upright. My hands flew to my nightgown, clean, pristine white cotton. No dirt, no ash, no blood. I examined my arms and legs, finding no cuts or bruises. Impossible. I had been there. I had seen it all. The digital clock read 9:42 a.m. I stumbled out of bed, grabbed a change of clothes, and rushed to the bathroom. In the mirror, my face looked normal. No trace of the strange powder Grandma had used. But dark circles hung beneath my eyes, and I looked troubled. I splashed water on my face, trying to clear my head. Had it all been a nightmare? The details were too vivid, too specific. I could still hear that inhuman screech, still see Grant's body flung against the barn wall, still feel the heat of the flames as they consumed the structure. After changing into jeans and a t-shirt, I hurried downstairs. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air as I rounded the corner into the dining room. "Morning, Emma," Mom called from the kitchen. "Thought you might sleep all day." The dining room table was filled with family members eating breakfast. Uncle Rob buttered toast. Aunt Kathy poured orange juice. Max scrolled through his phone while munching cereal. And Grant. Grant sat at the far end, completely unharmed, laughing at something Aunt Martha had said. I froze in the doorway, unable to process what I was seeing. Grant should be dead. Or at the very least, horribly injured. The bull had impaled him. I'd seen the blood spraying across the barn floor. "Emma, you okay, sweetheart?" Mom appeared beside me, a plate of pancakes in her hand. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Words failed me. I pointed toward Grant. But he was... the bull. Dad looked up from his newspaper with a concerned expression. "What's that about a bull?" "Last night," I managed. "In the barn. The ritual. The bull broke free and attacked Grant. The barn caught fire. The room fell silent. Family members exchanged quick glances. Grandpa set down his coffee cup, clearing his throat. Sounds like you had quite a nightmare, Emma." It wasn't a dream. My voice sounded shrill even to my own ears. We were all there. The bull broke loose and gored Grant. Uncle Rob's shoulder was torn open. The barn caught fire when I dropped my lantern. More glances exchanged, subtle nods. Aunt Kathy placed a hand on Uncle Rob's arm. "Emma, honey," Mom said gently, steering me toward an empty chair. "I think you just had a bad dream from too much food last night. You know how those barbecue beans can sit heavy." I stared at each face around the table. Their expressions ranged from concern to discomfort, but not one showed recognition of the horrors I described. "How did I get to bed last night?" I demanded. "You went up around 10, Dad said casually. "Said you were feeling tired. We all turned in pretty early after the barbecue. Big day of packing up today." I looked at Grant again. He offered a small, awkward smile. "Sorry to disappoint, but I'm fine," he said. "No bull attacks here. Though we're planning a trip to the Decorah fish hatchery this afternoon if you want to come. Way less dangerous than your dream." "You're all lying," I whispered, but doubt had begun to creep in. Could it really have been just a nightmare? It had felt so real. "Eat something," Grandma said, appearing from the kitchen with a glass of orange juice. "You'll feel better with food in your stomach." I accepted the glass mechanically, noticing how her eyes never quite met mine. As I raised it to my lips, I caught Grandma giving Grandpa a knowing look. Breakfast continued with forced normalcy. Conversation turned to the day's plans, packing suitcases, the fish hatchery visit, who would help clean out the refrigerator before everyone departed tomorrow. I picked at my pancakes, unable to shake the vivid memories of the night before. As Grant reached for the maple syrup, I noticed something. A fresh, bright red burn mark across the back of his hand. It hadn't been there yesterday. "What happened to your hand?" I asked sharply. Grant pulled his hand back quickly. "Oh, this? Burned it on the exhaust pipe of my motorcycle this morning. Stupid accident." I narrowed my eyes. The mark didn't look like the kind left by an exhaust pipe. It was wider and more spread out, resembling a burn from an open flame. When breakfast ended, I watched Uncle Rob stand and stretch, then wince noticeably when he raised his right arm. The same shoulder the bull had torn into. He caught me watching and quickly masked his discomfort with a forced smile. I needed to see the barn. Outside, the July morning was bright and clear. Birds chirped in the oak trees lining the driveway, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. Everything looked perfectly normal until I approached the barn. From a distance, the old oak structure appeared intact, but as I got closer, I noticed something odd. The wood on the west side looked newer, less weathered than I remembered. Fresh paint covered sections of the wall. The huge double doors had been replaced entirely, the wood unmarked by age or the symbols I'd seen carved into the frame. I ran my hands along the new wood. It felt wrong, too smooth compared to the century-old timber of the rest of the structure. The heavy padlock still secured the doors, but this one shone bright in the morning sun. Brand new. Crouching down, I examined the ground around the foundation. Amid the dirt and gravel, I found what I was looking for. Fine ash residue, partially washed away but still visible in the cracks between stones. I pinched some between my fingers, bringing it to my nose. The acrid smell of burned wood was unmistakable. "What are you doing?" I jumped at Uncle Rob's voice. He stood several yards away, his right arm held carefully against his body. "Just looking at the barn," I said, repeating my words from yesterday. "The paint looks fresh." "Your grandfather's been meaning to do some maintenance," he replied smoothly. "Finally got around to it this summer." "Overnight?" His smile tightened. "Been working on it all week. You just didn't notice till now." I stood up, brushing the ash from my fingers. "Your shoulder seems sore today." Uncle Rob's eyes hardened. "Old football injury. Acts up sometimes." "Right." I didn't bother hiding my skepticism. Football injury. His jaw clenched. Emma, sometimes dreams can seem very real, especially at your age with all the changes happening in your life. Best not to dwell on them. Is that what you told Grant 3 years ago? That it was just a dream? Uncle Rob stepped closer, lowering his voice. Drop it, Emma, for everyone's sake. Something in his tone sent a chill through me. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, his right arm still held carefully against his side. I continued my investigation, circling the entire barn. The ground surrounding it had been recently raked, erasing any signs of the chaos from the night before. No trampled grass, no footprints, no evidence of the fire that had consumed the structure. But they'd missed something. At the back of the barn, partially hidden by tall weeds, I found a small piece of scorched rope. The same heavy rope that had bound the bull. I picked it up and tucked it into my pocket, my hand shaking. I wasn't crazy. Something had happened last night. Back at the house, I climbed the steps to my bedroom, determined to find more evidence. The room looked exactly as it had yesterday. The handmade quilt neatly arranged, my overnight bag partially unpacked, the small desk beneath the window clear except for my hairbrush. The window. Something compelled me to look outside. I leaned out, examining the white clapboard exterior beneath my second-story window. There, painted in what looked like dried blood, was one of the strange symbols from the barn. An eye-like shape with tendrils extending outward. Protection. That's what Grant had called them. I heard the door creak behind me and spun around. Mom stood in the doorway, a stack of freshly laundered towels in her arms. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice too casual. "There's a symbol painted under my window," I said, "in blood." Mom set the towels down on the bed with deliberate care. "Emma, I think you need to let this dream go. It's not healthy to obsess over nightmares. Stop calling it a dream." I pulled the burned rope fragment from my pocket. "I found this behind the barn. The same rope that was used to tie up the bull." Mom's face paled. She closed the bedroom door, leaning against it. "Emma, please. For everyone's sake, let this go. I saw what happened. Grant was injured. Badly. The barn caught fire. Dad got hurt pushing me out of the way." I stepped closer to her. "Why are you all pretending it didn't happen? How is Grant even alive?" "Emma." Mom's voice cracked. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for eavesdroppers. "Some things are better left alone. The tradition works differently for each witness. Your experience, it's yours alone." "So it did happen." My suspicion confirmed. I felt strangely calm. "I didn't say that." Mom straightened, composing herself. "But whatever you think you saw or experienced, it's over now. Your turn as witness is complete. That's what matters. And we just go on pretending, acting like Grant wasn't nearly killed, like the barn didn't burn down?" "Yes." The single word sounded heavy and final. "That's exactly what we do. It's how we survive." "That's insane." "Maybe." Mom moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "But insane or not, it's how our family has endured for generations. Your father and I will be packing the car this afternoon. We leave first thing tomorrow morning." After she left, I sat on the edge of my bed, the scorched rope fragment still clutched in my hand. Part of me wanted to scream, to force them all to acknowledge what had happened. Another part wondered if I truly was losing my mind. The afternoon went by quickly with forced normalcy. I declined the fish hatchery trip, choosing instead to help with preparations for departure. No one mentioned my outburst at breakfast again, though I caught sideways glances from various family members. During dinner, the conversation remained deliberately light. Weather forecasts for the drive home tomorrow, school preparations for Max, a cousin's upcoming wedding. I picked at my food, watching Grant laugh and talk, as if he hadn't been brutally gored less than 24 hours ago. As twilight settled over the farm, I escaped to the front porch, needing space from the fake atmosphere inside. The porch swing creaked gently as I pushed myself back and forth with one foot, staring out at the cornfields stretching into the distance. "Mind if I join you?" Aunt Martha stood at the screen door, her kind face hesitant. "Sure," I said, moving to make room. She sat beside me, the swing groaning slightly under our combined weight. For several minutes we rocked in silence, watching as fireflies began to emerge from the tall grass. "It's been a difficult weekend for you," she finally said. I glanced at her, trying to read her expression in the fading light. "You could say that. The first time is always the hardest." Her voice was so quiet I barely caught the words, especially when things don't go as planned. "So you know," I said urgently. Martha stared straight ahead. "We all know, Emma. We've all had our turn. Then why pretend? Why gaslight me into thinking it was just a dream?" Her hand found mine on the swing, squeezing gently. "Because remembering is dangerous. The more you dwell on it, the stronger the connection becomes." "Connection to what? That thing wasn't just a bull, was it?" A screen door slammed somewhere around the side of the house. Martha tensed, withdrawing her hand from mine. "I shouldn't be talking about this," she whispered. "But you deserve something more than silence." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. After a quick glance toward the house, she pressed it into my hands. "Don't open this until you're alone in your room," she said urgently, "and don't tell anyone I gave it to you." Before I could ask any questions, the porch door swung open. Grandma stood there, her silver hair glowing in the porch light, her eyes sharp as they moved between Martha and me. "There you are, Martha," she said, her tone pleasant but firm. "Robert was looking for you. Something about the drive home tomorrow." Martha stood quickly. "Of course. I should go find him." As she passed Grandma, they shared a silent look. Grandma's expression remained neutral, but I caught the warning in her eyes. "Don't stay out here too long, Emma," Grandma said, her eyes falling to my hands. I quickly slipped the package into my pocket. "Early start tomorrow." After they left, I remained on the swing, the small package weighty in my pocket. Whatever truth it contained, Aunt Martha had risked Grandma's disapproval to give it to me. The fireflies continued moving across the darkening yard, their brief flashes blinking like signals. Tomorrow, we would leave this place, heading back to our normal lives. But I knew now that normal was just another fiction, as carefully constructed as the freshly painted barn walls. Something had happened in that barn. Something the family had spent generations controlling and concealing. And now I was part of that secret, bound by the same silent agreement that had frustrated me since our arrival. As it got completely dark, I finally stood and headed inside, the package secure in my pocket. Whatever answers it contained would have to wait until I was truly alone. Behind me, a noise rose from the distant cornfields. Not quite a screech, not quite a roar. Something primal and ancient that terrified me. I hurried inside, closing the door firmly behind me. Some things were better left outside in the dark. The sunrise bathed my bedroom in golden light as I sat cross-legged on the bed, turning Aunt Martha's package over in my hands. I'd waited until the house grew quiet last night, but exhaustion had claimed me before I could examine her gift. Now, on our final morning at the farm, I finally had my chance. My fingers trembled as I untied the twine. The brown paper crinkled as I carefully unwrapped it, revealing something fabric inside, white cotton, just like my nightgown. But this piece was charred along one edge, the pristine white stained with dark, rusty patches. Blood. I spread it out on the quilt, recognizing it immediately. The pattern of tiny blue flowers along the hem matched exactly the nightgown I was supposedly wearing when I dreamed about the bull in the barn. The nightgown that had been mysteriously clean when I awoke the next morning. A small folded note fell from the fabric. I picked it up, unfolding it to find Aunt Martha's neat handwriting. It's real. It's protection. Learn to forget for all our sakes. I stopped breathing for a moment. Proof. Actual, physical proof that I hadn't imagined everything. The fire had happened. The bull had been real. Grant had been injured. I clutched the fabric scrap, my mind racing. Why would Aunt Martha risk giving this to me? What did she mean by protection? Protection from what? A soft knock at my door made me jump. I quickly stuffed the nightgown piece and note under my pillow. "Emma, you up? Mom says breakfast in 15 minutes. Max's voice came through the door. "Yeah, I'm awake," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll be down soon." His footsteps retreated down the hallway. I retrieved the evidence from under my pillow, examining it again. The bloodstains couldn't be denied. Something violent had happened that night. Something the entire family was conspiring to hide. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt, tucking the nightgown scrap and note into my pocket. As I packed the last of my things into my overnight bag, I made a decision. I wouldn't leave without answers. Downstairs, breakfast was the usual chaotic affair of our final morning. Aunt Kathy distributed leftover pastries while Uncle Rob and Dad discussed the best routes home. Mom and Aunt Martha sorted through leftovers, deciding what to keep and what to toss. Max slouched at the table, half asleep over his cereal. I scanned the room for Grandma, not seeing her among the bustling family members. "Where's Grandma?" I asked Mom as I grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. "Garden," she replied without looking up from the Tupperware she was filling. "Picking some herbs to send home with everyone." Perfect. I slipped out the back door, the screen swinging shut behind me with a soft squeak. The morning air felt fresh against my face as I crossed the backyard toward the herb garden where Grandma spent so much of her time. She knelt between rows of aromatic plants, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. A small basket beside her already contained bundles of what looked like rosemary and thyme. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, snipping sprigs and binding them with twine. "Morning, Emma," she said without looking up. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," I replied, standing at the edge of the garden. "Hard to sleep when your family is lying to you." Her hands paused momentarily before resuming their work. "That's a serious accusation." "Is it?" I pulled the charred fabric from my pocket, holding it out. "Then explain this." Grandma's eyes flickered to the nightgown scrap, then back to her herbs. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? It's my nightgown. The one I was wearing 2 nights ago. The night everyone keeps telling me was just a dream. Put that away, Emma." Her voice remained calm, but an edge of steel had crept in. "It's not something to wave around in the open air." "Why? Because it proves I'm not crazy? Because it proves something happened in that barn?" Grandma sighed heavily, setting down her garden shears. She removed her gloves deliberately, buying time before meeting my eyes. "If you want answers, you'll need to help me finish here first," she said finally. "Pick those basil leaves while I finish with the sage, and keep that item in your pocket." Part of me wanted to refuse and to demand immediate answers, but something in her expression told me this was the only way. I stuffed the fabric back into my pocket and knelt beside her, beginning to pluck the fragrant basil leaves as directed. We worked in silence for several minutes, the buzz of bees and distant voices from the house the only sounds. Finally, when her basket was full, Grandma sat back on her heels and looked directly at me. "Martha shouldn't have given you that," she said quietly. "She thought I deserved the truth. Truth is complicated, dangerous sometimes." "I think I've earned it," I insisted. "I was there. I saw the bull break free. I saw it gore Grant. I saw the barn catch fire." Grandma looked around the area, ensuring we were alone before she spoke again. "What you saw was real, in a way," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And not real in others. It's both. That doesn't make any sense. Many true things don't. She stood slowly, her knees cracking with the effort. Walk with me to the old oak. I don't want little pitchers hearing this. I followed her away from the house toward a massive oak tree that stood alone in the side yard. Grandma lowered herself onto a weathered bench beneath the tree, patting the space beside her. 7 generations ago, she began once I'd sat down, your ancestor Jacob Wilson made a bargain to save his family during a terrible winter. They were starving, dying one by one. What kind of bargain? The kind that should never be made. Her eyes looked past me into some distant memory not her own. He met something in these fields, an entity not of this world. It offered salvation for Jacob's family in exchange for certain obligations. A chill ran through me even though it was warm. The bull? The entity can take many shapes. It appears differently to each witness. Grandma's fingers twisted together in her lap. The witnessing is part of the contract. Each year, one family member must observe its appearance in our world. Without that annual witnessing, the contract would be broken. And if the contract breaks? Her eyes met mine, unflinching. Then we all die. Every last Wilson, wherever they might be. The entity promised it would find us all. I struggled to process this. So this thing I saw, the bull, it wasn't really a bull. It was how your mind interpreted the entity's presence. The shape it takes reflects the witness's deepest fears. She paused, studying my reaction. For you, apparently, it appeared as a bull. But Grant was hurt, badly. I saw the blood. Yes, the appearance is physical, not just a vision. The injuries are real. The danger is real. Grandma's voice grew softer. That's why we use the protective rituals, the symbols, the herbs, and the old words passed down, to minimize harm and heal what damage is done. That's why Grant is fine now. Some ritual fixed him. My voice dripped with skepticism. Healing rituals, yes. Ancient knowledge passed down with the obligation. She touched my hand lightly. The blood on your nightgown was real. The fire was real. But our methods to repair and restore are also real. My head spun with this information. And everyone just accepts this? This crazy bargain made generations ago? What choice do we have? Grandma's shoulders slumped slightly. Breaking the contract means death for all of us. We've tested it before, tried to escape. Those attempts ended badly. So I was chosen as this year's witness. Why me? It follows a pattern. The obligation passes through the family line, moving from person to person. It was your turn. Her eyes softened with something like sympathy. Each person witnesses only once until the cycle returns, usually decades later, if they live so long. The weight of her words settled over me. And we just forget about it afterwards? Pretend nothing happened? That's how we survive, Emma. Remembering too clearly, thinking about it too much. It strengthens the connection to the entity, makes the nightmares worse. She squeezed my hand. Learn to forget, as Martha's note said, for your own safety. A terrible thought struck me. You said it follows a pattern. Who's next? Grandma's expression remained neutral, but her eyes flicked briefly toward the house. Max, next summer. My stomach dropped. My brother? He's just 16. Age doesn't matter to the contract. Each person in the bloodline must take their turn when it comes to them. And no one warned me because warning changes nothing except to create fear. The witnessing must happen regardless. And each experience is personal, unique to the witness. Describing it beforehand only creates false expectations. I stood abruptly, pacing beneath the oak tree. This is insane. We're stuck with some supernatural contract made centuries ago. Yes, Grandma said simply. That's exactly what's happening. Her honest answer stopped me short. I'd expected more denials, more evasions. Your turn is complete now, Emma. The piece of your nightgown proves your participation. She looked up at me. You won't be called to witness again for many years, but Max will be next year. My voice hardened. And you expect me to help prepare him? To lie to him like everyone lied to me? I expect you to help him survive it, yes. Grandma's tone matched mine in intensity. That's what we do. We protect each other through this obligation we didn't choose but cannot escape. From the house, Mom's voice called out across the yard. Emma, time to load up the car. Grandma stood collecting her basket of herbs. Your mother doesn't know we've had this conversation. It's better that way. More secrets, I muttered. Necessary ones. She started toward the house, then paused. That piece of nightgown. It needs to be burned before you leave. Complete destruction is the final step of the ritual. What if I don't want to burn it? What if I want proof that I'm not crazy? Her eyes hardened. Then you risk drawing the entity's attention outside of the witnessing. No physical evidence should remain. That's part of the protection. I followed her back toward the house, my mind still reeling. As we approached the back porch, she stopped and turned to me one last time. You'll understand better as time passes. The forgetting will come naturally if you let it. She reached into her basket and pulled out a small bundle of herbs tied with twine. Put these under your pillow for the next month. They'll help with the nightmares. I took the herbs reluctantly, the scent sharp and strange in my nostrils. The driveway was busy with activity. Uncle Rob and Aunt Kathy were already pulling out in their SUV, hands waving through open windows. Dad finished securing our luggage on the roof rack while Mom did one final sweep through the house for forgotten items. I found Grant loading suitcases into his parents' car. The burn on his hand was still visible, though less angry looking than before. All packed up? He asked, noticing my approach. Almost. I lowered my voice. The bull. What shape did it take for you? 3 years ago? His face went completely blank, eyes vacant for a moment before refocusing on me. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I know everything now. Grandma told me about the contract. Grant looked around nervously before leaning closer. Don't talk about it. Talking makes it stronger. Makes what stronger? The connection. The memories. He shook his head. Trust me, Emma. Learn to forget. It's the only way. Before I could respond, Max bounded down the porch steps, backpack slung over one shoulder. Dad says 5 minutes or I get to drive, he announced with a grin. In your dreams, kid, I replied automatically, the normal banter a strange contrast to the supernatural reality I'd just uncovered. Looking at Max, my annoying, goofy little brother, I felt a wave of protective anger. Next summer, he would face whatever horrors the entity chose to show him, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. As I turned to walk into the house for my bag, I caught Grandma watching me from the porch. Her expression was knowing, almost sympathetic. She'd carried this knowledge for decades, preparing witness after witness without being able to spare them the experience. In my bedroom, I quickly gathered my remaining belongings. The charred nightgown scrap lay on my bed where I'd left it. Following an impulse I didn't fully understand, I struck a match from the small box on the nightstand and held it to the fabric. The cotton caught immediately, flames licking across the bloodstains. I dropped the burning fabric into the metal trash can, watching as it curled and blackened, reducing to ash. A weight seemed to lift from my chest as the last evidence disappeared. Downstairs, final goodbyes were being exchanged. I hugged Grandpa stiffly, not knowing how much he knew about my conversation with Grandma. Aunt Martha caught my eye across the room, raising her eyebrows in silent question. I gave her the smallest of nods, acknowledging the gift of truth she'd given me. Grandma pressed a jar of homemade blackberry jam into my hands. For your morning toast, she said, her ordinary words carrying additional meaning only I understood. Thank you, I replied, meaning it more than she knew. Even though everything had happened, she had finally given me the answers I'd searched for. As we pulled away from the farmhouse, I watched through the rear window as it grew smaller in the distance. The old oak barn stood silent and seemingly innocent in the morning sun, its fresh paint hiding the horrors it had contained. "Good visit?" Dad asked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. "Memorable," I answered, turning to look at Max, who was already dozing against the window beside me. I slipped the bundle of herbs Grandma had given me into my pocket, wondering if they'd really help with the nightmares I knew would come. As the farm disappeared around a bend in the road, I understood at last why the family maintained their veil of silence, why they pretended nothing had happened, why they encouraged forgetting. Some truths were too heavy to carry in everyday life, some obligations too terrible to think about except when absolutely necessary. In the year ahead, I would have to find the balance between remembering enough to help Max and forgetting enough to stay sane. I was now part of the chain that stretched back 7 generations, bound by a contract I never signed but could never escape. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the headrest. Already the details of what I'd witnessed in the barn were beginning to blur around the edges. Perhaps forgetting wouldn't be as difficult as I feared. Perhaps that was the most terrifying thought of all.